Hey guys, tonight we travel to a land of blazing suns, whispering sand dunes, and a level of summer heat that would make your phone overheat just from thinking about it. Imagine this. You're standing on the edge of the Persian desert. It's late evening. The last orange streaks of sunlight are slipping below the horizon, and the sky is stretching into a velvet blue. You can hear the soft crunch of your sandals on the dry earth, feel the sting of heat still radiating from the stones, and smell distant traces of cumin and roasted lamb on the breeze. This is ancient Persia, what you now call Iran, and somehow, against all logic, this place is home to some of the oldest known forms of refrigeration. You've just stepped into a world where ice exists in the middle of a desert, not in your insulated cooler or a high-tech freezer, but buried in mud brick structures built thousands of years ago. And the best part? They're not just keeping things cold, they're making dessert. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a faraway time zone, let me know where you are and what time you're falling asleep to this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward under the fading light, your eyes adjusting as stars prick the sky above you. Before long, a strange dome-shaped structure looms into view. It's huge, easily 3 stories tall, and shaped like an upside-down funnel. It's made of mud bricks, thick and weathered, and there's a long slit near the top that seems to whistle with wind. This is a yakhchal, a literal ice pit, and you're about to find out how it works. But first, you should know, surviving a Persian summer without these things? You probably wouldn't last past lunch. The desert doesn't care about your hydration levels or SPF rating. Daytime temperatures can spike past 110 degrees Fahrenheit 43 degrees Celsius, and just when you think you've melted entirely, night arrives, and the air drops like a stone into freezing territory. This brutal swing between heat and cold was exactly what ancient Persians needed to get clever. So clever, in fact, that historians are still piecing together how they figured all of this out so early. Some argue they developed their cooling tech as early as 400 BCE. Others suggest the techniques may have been passed down orally from even older nomadic tribes who understood the desert better than modern meteorologists. What we do know is this: Persia was obsessed with managing heat, not just escaping it, but taming it, bending it to their will, cooling their wine, their yogurt, even their emotions. Persian poetry often linked coldness with clarity, control, and elegance. Ice wasn't just a luxury, it was an entire aesthetic. And these yakhchāls? They were the crown jewels of that aesthetic. You walk closer to the dome and run your hand along the rough, cool surface. The walls are made of saruj, a special blend of clay, sand, egg whites, goat hair, ash, and lime. Yep, that's right, egg whites and goat hair. It might sound like the world's least appetizing omelet, but this magical mortar is waterproof and heat-resistant. The structure's thick walls, sometimes up to 2 meters, keep the inner chamber insulated year-round. You duck through a small arched doorway and descend a few steps into the belly of the dome. Inside, it's immediately cooler, maybe even 40 degrees cooler than outside. You can hear the faint drip of melting ice, echoing gently in the darkness like the world's most soothing leaky faucet. This chamber once stored literal tons of ice harvested from the mountains or frozen on shallow night pools in the courtyard outside. The Persians would line the floor with straw, stack the ice layer by layer, and cover it all with more straw and insulating bricks. Even in July, you'd be able to dig into this frosty bunker and find a nice cool slab of ice, just enough to drop into your pomegranate juice. It's hard not to marvel at the simplicity of it all. No electric fans, no freon, just mud, physics, and a stubborn refusal to sweat through another summer. And speaking of physics, here's your quick sleepy science moment. The design of the yakhchal takes full advantage of evaporative cooling. As wind rushes through that slit at the top, sometimes called a windcatcher or badger, it pulls hot air out and draws cool night air in. Combine that with thick insulation and strategically placed shadow, and you've got nature's refrigerator. Historians still argue whether these structures were first built for ice or whether their purpose evolved over time. Some believe they were originally used to store food and water, only later adapted for ice. Others say the elite demanded cold drinks long before the peasants had enough grain to eat regularly. Priorities, right? Either way, you're now standing inside an ancient AC unit that doubles as an ice cream freezer. There's a soft breeze moving through the chamber now, carrying the scent of earth and straw and something faintly floral. You sit down on a cool stone bench built into the wall. Imagine, for a moment, that you're a servant of the king. Your job? Retrieve a block of ice for tomorrow's saffron sorbet. And no, you're not allowed to eat any. You might be tempted to pocket a sliver, just enough to press against your wrist, or maybe to sneak under your turban, but these blocks are precious. There are records of people being punished just for stealing a cup of ice. It was a public resource, sure, but also a sacred one. Keeping your cool was, quite literally, a virtue. So, you sit, and you listen to the slow dripping. You breathe in that cool, musky air, and for just a moment, you forget how hot the desert really is. Outside, the stars have brightened, and the wind has started to sing through the windcatcher, a low and rhythmic hum. It's almost enough to make you forget about the sand in your shoes. Almost. You step back out into the desert night, leaving behind the cool breath of the yakhchal's inner chamber. The air out here feels hotter now by comparison, as if the desert resents being outdone by a dome full of ice. Above you, stars scatter across the ink-black sky in that clear, sharp way they only do far from cities and light. It's hard not to feel small out here, but not unimportant. You've just seen something remarkable, and it's only the beginning. Because while the yakhchal is impressive, the real magic lies in how that ice got there in the first place. Welcome to the strange, seasonal ritual of ice harvesting, without a freezer in sight. You follow a narrow path lined with crumbling walls and dry shrubs, until you reach a wide courtyard beside another dome. The ground here is completely flat, almost unnaturally so, and bordered by low mud walls. You've arrived at one of the ice pools, shallow basins built specifically to freeze water during the coldest winter nights. Now, here's the trick. They didn't just dump water into a hole and hope for the best. The pools were carefully positioned to face away from the sun, usually to the north, so they could stay in the shadows even during the brief winter daylight. The walls shielded them from desert winds that might stir the surface too much, and most importantly, they were shallow, just a few inches deep, thin enough to freeze quickly during the freezing desert nights, even if the air wasn't exactly Arctic-level cold. You kneel beside the basin and run your fingers over its surface, imagining the water that once lay here. Ice would form overnight in delicate sheets. At dawn, workers with thick scarves and even thicker eyebrows would carefully break up the frozen layer, scoop it into woven baskets, and carry it to the yakhchal for storage. No ice cube trays, no thermometers, just timing, tradition, and the kind of patience that today's microwave society might find personally offensive. This wasn't just a quirky winter job, either. Ice harvesting was a coordinated affair, like a flash mob, but colder and with more donkeys. Villagers, laborers, and even children would pitch in. It was labor-intensive, dirty, and a bit wet, but essential. People relied on this ice not just for desserts, but for preserving food, soothing fevers, and frankly, just to feel a little fancy in the middle of nowhere. And the stakes? Pretty high. If you didn't harvest enough ice during the cold spell, that was it. No do-overs. No backup shipment from the frozen goods section. You just sweated it out for the rest of the year, hoping your goat's milk wouldn't curdle before lunch. Interestingly, some historians argue about just how cold it really got in ancient Persia. Climate models suggest that winters, while chilly, weren't always reliably freezing. So how did they manage? Theories range from microclimate manipulation, like digging deeper basins in colder ground, to spiritual rituals designed to invite the cold. Whether or not the gods of frost actually RSVP'd, the ice still came. Usually. And here's where things get even more charmingly chaotic. Storing that ice wasn't just about keeping it cold. It was about not losing it. Because once you piled your precious snow slabs into the yakhchal, you had to make sure no one borrowed a piece. Theft was a constant concern. In some towns, watchmen were stationed by the domes during summer months, fending off ice pirates armed with burlap sacks and very chill attitudes. But despite the effort and the drama, the system worked. Ice harvested in the darkest months of January could last deep into June or even July. That's 5 months of desert refrigeration, without a single electrical outlet. Modern engineers have marveled at the yakhchal's efficiency. Some even claim these structures kept temperatures around freezing even when it was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Let that sink in. Your apartment can't even keep your leftovers cold when the power blinks out. And these folks were storing popsicles in the sand 2,500 years ago. You stand again, brushing the dust from your palms, and look out over the shadowy courtyard. You imagine the long-gone workers, their arms red from the cold, their breath hanging in the frigid air. You can hear the soft clink of ice chunks being dropped into baskets, the rustle of straw, the muttered curses when someone inevitably slips and lands bottom first in a slushy puddle. It's strangely comforting, this image. Ancient people, trying to stay cool. Just like you. Just like all of us. Off to the side, a low wooden structure draws your eye. It's a tool shed, or was. Inside, you find simple gear, wooden shovels, flat trays for carrying ice, and long-handled scoops made from bronze and leather. The tools are dusty but perfectly preserved, like they've been waiting for someone to pick them up again. You resist the urge. Your job tonight is just to observe. Besides, if anyone's stealing ice, it's probably that squirrel watching you from the wall. Above you, a gentle wind stirs, brushing against your cheek with surprising coolness. It's the desert's little secret. Night here is not an enemy. It's an ally, a chance to freeze what can't be frozen by day. And the Persians knew exactly how to use it. There's a subtle rhythm to this world. Freeze by night, store by day, return to the ice when the sun becomes unbearable. It's not just engineering, it's choreography. A dance between earth, air, and water played out over centuries. And the music? That's just the wind humming through the yakhchal, softly repeating secrets only the desert remembers. You wander past the last of the frozen basins, your sandals making soft scuffs in the dusty earth. The moon is higher now, casting long silver shadows that stretch out like sleepy fingers. There's a stillness to the night air, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind passing between ancient walls and the distant howl of some nocturnal creature with too many teeth and not enough bedtime. But you're not afraid. You're curious, because the mystery of how ancient Persians made ice doesn't stop at storing it. It goes deeper. You turn a corner and come face to face with something that looks suspiciously like a ditch, but is actually one of the cleverest inventions ever designed by people without electrical wiring, the night freezing canal. This narrow trench, dug precisely along a slight incline, is lined with stone and brick and engineered to collect water at sunset. At night, when temperatures dip and the dry desert air turns cold, the water begins to freeze. No artificial help required. It's like the world's largest ice tray, but without the frustrating bit where you spill it all walking from the sink to the freezer. As you peer into the trench, you can almost picture it in action. Shallow water glistening under starlight, a thin layer of frost beginning to shimmer at the edges. And above it all, silence, save for the occasional snore from a watchman curled up beside the canal, wrapped in a wool cloak, and probably dreaming about not having to harvest ice again tomorrow. The secret to this night freezing? Radiative cooling. Stay with me here. This is the kind of science that even your brain in sleep mode can appreciate. On cloudless nights, objects on Earth naturally radiate heat into the sky. If you reduce surrounding heat sources, like warm walls or fire pits, and leave your water exposed to open sky, the surface will cool faster than the air around it. It's the same reason your car windshield frosts over even when the weather app says it's 40 degrees out. Magic? No. Thermodynamics? Yes. Irritating when you're late for work? Also yes. Historians still argue whether the Persians fully understood the physics behind this, or if they simply figured it out by centuries of trial, error, and complaining about lukewarm pomegranate juice. Either way, they perfected the practice. Some sources suggest they even coated the canal beds in black rock to absorb the last rays of sunlight during the day, helping the freezing process by creating a thermal contrast come nightfall. Now, you might ask, what if the night wasn't cold enough? What if the sky clouded over and no frost appeared? Simple. You'd wake up early, curse under your breath, and start again the next night. Not every system is foolproof, but the elegance here lies in its patience. You don't need perfection. You just need enough. And enough was often measured in how many shallow bricks of ice could be stacked by sunrise, ferried to the nearby Yakhchal, and buried beneath hay before the sun's fingers started poking over the horizon. You sit on the low edge of the trench, watching your breath puff into the cold air, and you wonder, who was the first person to notice this? Was it a farmer, lying awake beside his goats, who stuck a toe into a puddle and yelped? Was it a child, bored out of their mind, who dropped a toy in a ditch and found it frozen the next morning? Or maybe it was one of those eccentric uncles every culture seems to have. The guy who insists on sleeping outdoors with clay pots and a chicken named after Cyrus the Great. Whoever it was, they unlocked a simple truth. Cold air is free. You just have to catch it while it lasts. Nearby, you spot a row of earthen pots lined up like sleepy soldiers. These weren't for freezing, they were for testing. At night, families would place water-filled jars in protected spots to see where frost formed quickest. Over time, entire communities developed little frost maps of their towns, cold spots, warm corners, wind funnels. It was like crowdsourced refrigeration, long before anyone invented thermometers or crowdsourcing. And there was a social side to it too. Ice collection wasn't just a chore, it was a ritual. Young men trying to impress potential in-laws would volunteer for night freeze duty, showing off their endurance and their ability to not drop an ice brick on their own foot. Grandmothers would critique their technique from windows, offering unsolicited advice like, try turning the water clockwise, it listens better. You lean back, feeling the cool of the bricks beneath you, and look up. The stars are impossibly clear, the sky stretched tight like silk across the universe. There's something comforting in knowing that the same moon you're looking at tonight once illuminated this exact ice canal 1,000 years ago. That someone else, long forgotten, once sat in your very spot, wondering how to keep next summer's yogurt from melting. The wind picks up again, a low sigh curling past your ear, and for a second, it almost sounds like the canal itself is speaking. Not in words, of course. Don't worry, you haven't slipped into a heat dream, but in soft reminders of ingenuity, of patience, of the strange, wonderful ways people have always found to make life just a little more comfortable. You dust off your robe and rise, moving slowly toward the next cluster of buildings. But before you leave the canal behind, you glance back once more. The trench lies quiet, ready for its next freeze, ready to catch the cold like a whispered secret from the stars. You pass beyond the night-freezing trenches, feeling the temperature drop just a little more. The wind at your back whispers encouragement, or maybe it's just trying to hurry you along before sunrise ruins all the carefully laid chill. Up ahead, faint golden light spills from the windows of an adobe structure tucked low against the earth, half-hidden, almost shy. It's not another ice house. It's something subtler. You're entering the quiet world of passive cooling, where the desert's extremes are tamed not by brute force, but by wisdom, geometry, and the sneaky elegance of shade. To your left, a smooth wall stretches out at an angle, slanting away from the rising sun. It's a frost wall, built tall and wide to cast the longest shadow possible over the ground where water waits to freeze. This particular technique feels like something you'd try if you were both tired and clever. Rather than chase the cold, you build a shadow and let it do the chasing for you. Some scholars suggest these walls were positioned based on detailed solar tracking. Others argue people simply figured out where it felt least awful to stand on a summer afternoon and thought, let's build here. Either way, it worked. You run your hand along the wall's cool side and imagine the sun crawling up behind you, disappointed at its lack of dominance. As you keep walking, something even stranger catches your eye. A long, rectangular pool of water, not frozen this time, but faintly steaming. It's fed by a narrow trench connected to a larger network. This isn't an ice canal. This is part of a system that actively made ice even during warmer nights. You crouch beside the water. It's shallow, wide, and lined with dark stone. During the day, this stone absorbs as much heat as possible, becoming a solar sponge. Then at night, when air temperatures dip and there's no cloud cover, the stone rapidly releases that stored heat, pulling warmth away from the water faster than usual. It's counterintuitive, but fascinating. By baking the rock during the day, they supercharge their nighttime freezing. A little bit like working a double shift just to take a longer nap. You chuckle to yourself. Even in ancient Persia, some things never change. But that's not the only method in play here. On the far side of the courtyard, a windcatcher juts skyward from a modest mud brick home. You pause beneath it, feeling the soft inhale and exhale of desert air being funneled through the vertical shaft. It's not dramatic, just a faint breeze. But that's the point. The Badger, or Windcatcher, is a marvel of low-tech air conditioning. It captures higher, cooler air and channels it downward into living spaces, often over small pools or wet surfaces to create evaporative cooling. It's like nature's version of a ceiling fan, but with more math and fewer moving parts. And the best part? It works even when there's barely a breeze. The temperature difference alone creates movement. Hot air rises, cool air falls, and your bedroom becomes a personal oasis. You imagine falling asleep beneath one of these, the air whispering across your face, a clay cup of snow-chilled rose water on the nightstand. Sleep would come fast. So would the smug satisfaction of not paying an energy bill. Historians still debate whether windcatchers originated in Persia or were borrowed from neighboring Mesopotamian cultures. What's clear is that they spread fast, like desert gossip, and became a staple in Persian architecture for centuries. Even today, some traditional homes in Yakhchals still use them. You wander into one such home now, ducking under a low doorway into a spacious courtyard. At its center sits a shallow fountain, its surface barely rippling. Around it are shaded walkways, thick earthen walls, and colorful tiles that have faded into pastel size over time. It's the kind of space that feels naturally calm, like the architecture itself is exhaling. And tucked into a corner of the courtyard, an amphora half buried in the soil, its curved top poking out like a turtle's shell. You lift it gently and realize it's cool to the touch. Inside, a mixture of yogurt and honey waits, preserved not by magic, but by insulation, airflow, and evaporative cooling. Clay pots like these, when kept damp, allow just enough moisture to escape and pull heat with it. The result? Ancient air conditioning for your groceries. You sit cross-legged beside the fountain, dipping your fingers in the water. The surface is colder than expected. That's the magic of design here. Nothing wasted, nothing random. The courtyard collects wind. The walls trap shade. The fountain cools the air. And the floor, set slightly below ground level, benefits from the natural chill of the earth itself. You imagine a family gathering here after sundown. Lanterns flickering. Children chasing each other barefoot. An elder sipping cold goat's milk and declaring it not as good as last year's, which is probably true and also completely irrelevant. The air would be filled with quiet laughter and slow conversation, punctuated by the clink of clay cups and the soft burble of the fountain. This wasn't just a home. It was a climate strategy, wrapped in art, ritual, and community. You lean back against a wall still cool from hours of shadow and let your eyes close briefly. In a world of chaos and sandstorms, the people of Persia figured out how to build spaces that whispered peace. Spaces that held on to the cold like it was a secret worth keeping. Out in the desert, the first hints of dawn are curling along the horizon. A soft blue has crept into the sky, gentle and unhurried. But here, in this quiet courtyard cooled by ancient knowledge and careful planning, it still feels like the middle of the night. You open your eyes just a little, blinking into the soft pre-dawn light. The courtyard around you hasn't changed, but it feels different now, like the desert is holding its breath. This is the hour when everything hesitates. Not quite night, not yet day. A perfect time to step into the sandals of the true masterminds behind all this desert coolness. The builders, the architects, the ice whisperers. You rise slowly, stretching your back with a quiet crack that echoes louder than expected off the tiled walls. Then you follow a narrow alleyway out of the courtyard and toward the edge of the old city. There, beyond a row of fig trees and sleepy chickens, stands another yakhchal. This one older, worn smooth by centuries of sandstorms and sun. It leans slightly to one side, like an elder dozing in his chair, but still holds its ground. You approach it differently this time, not as a curious visitor, but as an apprentice builder, summoned by your master at dawn, hair full of dust and brain full of math you swore you'd never use. Because constructing one of these marvels wasn't guesswork. It required precision, patience, and a startling understanding of natural forces. First, you had to choose the site. Not just a shady spot, but the spot where sun angles, prevailing winds, and subsoil moisture all came together in quiet agreement. A bad placement meant ice would melt too soon, water would pool, or worse, the walls would sweat. Yes, yakhchāls can sweat. Clay is a living thing, after all. Porous, moody, and easily overwhelmed by poor planning. The base was dug deep, sometimes 3 meters or more, lined with insulating material and occasionally a layer of charcoal to absorb moisture. Builders then layered up the saruj, our old friend made from clay, ash, lime, sand, egg whites, and goat hair. Each layer was allowed to cure under the sun, hardening into a structure both heat-resistant and surprisingly waterproof. Now imagine you're mixing this stuff by hand, sweating into the clay, the egg whites sticking to your fingers, and the goat hair clinging to your robe like a weirdly devoted cat. There's no cement mixer, no gloves, just experience and elbow grease. Once the mixture was ready, construction moved upward in stages, spiraling toward that signature dome. The cone shape wasn't just for flair. It was deliberate, wide at the bottom to hold the ice, narrow at the top to minimize heat transfer and funnel hot air away. And don't forget the badger, the windcatcher. It had to be aligned just right to catch the prevailing breezes and guide them down through a hidden vertical shaft. In some designs, these shafts connected to underground tunnels that pulled cool air in from canals. Those mysterious subterranean aqueducts Persia is famous for. The combination of shade, insulation, and steady airflow created a delicate harmony of temperature. Some yakhchāls even had tiny holes near the top to let hot air escape like a silent sigh. It's not unlike a stovepipe, but in reverse. Instead of warming a room, you're cooling a block of ice. Inside out, upside down. Desert logic. Historians still argue about just how much mathematics went into the proportions. Did the builders understand surface area to volume ratios? Did they use early forms of geometry to calculate insulation depths? Or was it all handed down through dusty oral tradition and generations of pointing at the sun with squinted eyes? The truth probably lies somewhere in between, a mix of science and superstition, data and dusty feet. You step inside this older yakhchal, ducking beneath its curved arch. The interior is dark, much darker than the last one. But the air? Still cool. Still heavy with the scent of straw, damp clay, and the faintest hint of pine smoke from long-forgotten torches. You touch the wall and find it slick, barely. Moisture has condensed here, just like it was meant to. After centuries, the design still works. And here's the kicker. Most of these were built with local materials. No imports. No exotic ingredients. Just what the desert offered. Mud, air, hair, and hope. It's like baking a gourmet cake using only what you found in the junk drawer. You turn slowly inside the dome, letting the quiet settle into your ears. The acoustics are strange. Your steps echo back, but with a soft delay. Some researchers think this was intentional too. A way to dampen noise, maybe, or simply a byproduct of perfect symmetry. Either way, it feels holy. Like a whispering temple dedicated to ice. You pause and imagine the final moment of construction. The last brick placed, the last smear of saruj smoothed into place. The builders stepping back, wiping their faces, probably arguing over whether the slope was 2 degrees too steep. Then silence. Waiting. Winter would come, and with it, ice. And if the structure did its job, the people would have cool drinks long into the burning months of summer. Outside, the sky has turned the color of old rose petals. Pale pink and gold. The desert is beginning to stir. Birds chirp. A donkey brays. Someone somewhere bangs a pot, either cooking or waking up the lazy members of the household, possibly both. But inside this dome, it's still night. Still cold. Still perfect. You run your fingers one last time along the interior curve and step out into the sunrise. Behind you, the yakhchal glows faintly in the dawn light, an ancient refrigerator still holding its ground. A monument not to power or war or kings, but to comfort, to cleverness, to staying chill in every sense of the word. The sun finally peaks over the jagged horizon, splashing pale gold across the sand and rooftops. You squint into the light, your eyes not quite ready, your skin already bracing itself for the slow burn of a desert morning. It's a good time to slip into the quieter corners of the city, places that whisper instead of shout. And in ancient Persia, few cities whispered more elegantly than Yazd and Qazvin. You walk slowly now, the streets of the city stretching before you like warm ribbons, twisting between ochre-colored buildings and archways casting thin, stubborn shadows. Here, in these labyrinthine alleys, people didn't just survive the heat. They hid from it, with a level of subtlety that feels almost passive-aggressive. In Qazvin, one of the oldest cities in Iran, homes were often built with sunken courtyards and hidden cellars. These weren't just architectural flourishes, they were tactical retreats. Imagine stepping into a home and immediately descending into a room 6 feet below street level, lined with soft bricks and hung with damp cloths. Cool, dark, and perfect for waiting out the afternoon sun like a heat-shy vampire. Then there's Yazd. You step into its old quarter, where the alleys are so narrow you could shake hands with your neighbor across the way, assuming you weren't both fanning yourselves and cursing the noonday blaze. But these tight pathways had a purpose: shade. The narrower the street, the longer the shadow. And in Yazd, even the shadows feel like they've been engineered. You pause beneath a particularly graceful arch overhead. One of Yazd's iconic windcatchers rises above the skyline like a proud chimney that took a creative writing class. These towers, some of them 30 feet tall, the city like sleepy sentinels, turning hot wind into a gentle indoor breeze. Some homes had as many as 4 windcatchers, each aligned to different compass points, so that no matter which way the wind blew, the house could breathe. And this wasn't some elite luxury. Even modest households had them, because staying cool wasn't just about comfort, it was survival. You didn't want your neighbor keeling over in the bread line just because his house forgot to inhale. You wander through a quiet market lane now, past stalls still closed tight with wooden shutters. The scent of dust, old spices, and something sweet, possibly dried figs, possibly wishful thinking, lingers in the air. Beneath your feet, the ground dips slightly, and you follow the slope into a sardab, a subterranean room used for storage and sleeping during the summer months. It's cold here. Not just cooler, cold. You run your hand along the wall and feel condensation gathering. Somewhere beneath you, a canal runs silently, a water tunnel dug by hand, often for miles, from mountain springs to the city center. These underground rivers were more than plumbing. They were the veins of the desert. And in homes like this, the canals were carefully directed beneath floors, bringing a continuous chill that wrapped the room in still, refreshing silence. Historians still argue how ancient engineers could calculate the slope of a canal so perfectly over such long distances. Some say they used tools like the plumb bob and water level, adjusting inch by inch through trial and error. Others believe they relied on instinct and intimate knowledge of the land, like desert composers tuning a water symphony only they could hear. You lie back on a smooth stone bench carved into the sardab wall. The light from the staircase above is pale now, filtered through a damp cloth that flutters in the breeze. It's almost dark in here, but not heavy dark, just sleep dark, like the kind of room where even your thoughts would rather whisper. Above you, the city is waking up. You hear the creak of a wooden door, the sweep of a broom on cobblestone, the soft thump of sandals as a baker hurries toward his oven. But down here, time stretches. You imagine yourself living in one of these homes. Maybe you're a merchant who trades in saffron and dates. Maybe you're a calligrapher, spending your mornings copying poems by Hafez onto silk scraps. Or maybe you're just someone who deeply appreciates not sweating through your undergarments by 8 a.m. Whatever your role, your afternoons would be spent here, in the sardab, lying perfectly still as the house exhales cool air and time forgets to move. Back above ground, you climb a staircase that curves toward another domed rooftop. From here, the view is surreal. Windcatchers rising like sails above the adobe sea, domes painted with faded blues, alleys curling through the city like lazy rivers of stone. It's peaceful, and all around you, air moves, quiet, purposeful, and endlessly patient. Yazd, in particular, has been called the city of silence, not because it lacks life, but because its architecture speaks in murmurs. Wind, water, and mud brick conspire together to create a language of coolness. Not the fashionable kind, no sunglasses required, but the kind that lets you rest without worry, that lets you sleep while the sun scorches the sky overhead. You sit quietly for a moment, listening to the breath of the windcatcher nearby. It's not a gust or a howl, just a hush, like someone softly shushing a baby. Or maybe, just maybe shushing you. You descend from the rooftop slowly, like someone reluctant to leave a particularly good dream. The domes of Yazd shrink behind you as the sun climbs higher, pushing warmth into every crevice of the city. But you're heading somewhere sweeter. Literally. Because today, my friend, you're about to taste something ancient, fragrant, and absurdly luxurious. Forget your corner store vanilla. This is Persian ice cream, or as it's known here, Bastani Sunnati. And it's been delighting overheated humans long before gelato got its PR team. You find yourself in a narrow alley leading into an old market. The scent hits you first: rosewater, saffron, and something cold. Not just cold, the kind of cold that carries weight, like it had to fight its way through the desert just to arrive in your nostrils. Inside the shop, a marble counter glistens. Behind it, a man in a simple robe is stirring something thick and golden with a wooden paddle. He nods at you. You nod back. That's it. That's the transaction. One nod equals one scoop. He hands you a dish of what looks like a frozen sunrise. Pale yellow, streaked with pistachio green and tiny flecks of something floral. You take a bite, and suddenly your mouth is filled with creamy cold, balanced with just enough sweetness to make your eyebrows lift like startled pigeons. The saffron sings, the rosewater hums, and the ice. The ice is so smooth it practically apologizes for being cold. This is an ice cream in the modern sense. It's denser, silkier. It resists your spoon just a little before giving way, like a dignified elder who secretly enjoys being convinced. But here's the twist. This delight didn't start in a cafe. It started with snow. Back in the time of Darius the Great, long before electric freezers or waffle cones, people were making frozen treats using snow and ice harvested from the Elburz Mountains, packed in straw, hauled down by mule or camel, and stored carefully in those icy sanctuaries you've already explored. And no, they weren't just eating plain snow like a bored kid in January. The Persians added syrups made from grape must, honey, and fruit juices. They crushed the snow into soft shavings and mixed in fragrant ingredients like cardamom, sour cherry, and mint. Some even folded in rose petals, because why not? If you're sweating in the desert, you might as well do it with a little drama. This early frozen dessert was called faluda, and it's still eaten today in Iran. Imagine vermicelli noodles made from starch, chilled until nearly frozen, then soaked in a syrup of lime and rose water. Slippery, sweet, and icy, it's like dessert spaghetti had a spa day. You glance around the shop and see a large clay vessel near the back. That's the traditional storage pot for bastani and faluda. The clay keeps the contents chilled, even without refrigeration. And the lid? Covered with thick fabric, wet around the edges to encourage evaporative cooling. It's such a simple, effective system that some dessert shops in the hottest cities still use it. Historians still argue over who made the very first ice cream. Was it the Persians? The Chinese? The Romans with their mountain runner snow delivery squads? Probably a bit of everyone, since humans have a long and universal tradition of saying, "I'm hot. Let's freeze something and eat it." But Persia's claim is strong. The records go back thousands of years, and the ingredients? Always indulgent. When your version of ice cream includes saffron, mastic resin, and pistachio shards, you're not just cooling down. You're making a statement. You take another bite. The saffron lingers at the back of your tongue. It's not just flavor, it's time. Each spoonful carries centuries of desert ingenuity, mountain snow, and someone in a long robe muttering, "This would be better if it were colder." You wander out of the shop with your dish in hand, stepping into a shaded arcade where the air feels just a little cooler. Thanks to a nearby Kennet, no doubt. Merchants are opening their stalls now, brushing off woven rugs, arranging clay jars, and shaking out linen robes. Someone waves a fan over a bowl of dates. Someone else yawns theatrically and loudly accuses the sun of being early again. It's life, moving slowly. And you? You're licking frozen saffron cream from a wooden spoon, walking through a market older than some countries, surrounded by cooling systems that haven't changed in 1,000 years. You pass a group of children laughing as they share a bowl of faluda, their cheeks sticky and pink from the cold. One of them drops a spoon, looks at it on the ground, and decides to eat with their fingers instead. Ancient problems, eternal solutions. You pause near a small fountain bubbling gently in the shade. The water sparkles, and for a moment, everything is still. The taste of rosewater in your mouth, the soft splash of the fountain, the sigh of a breeze shaped by mud brick and logic. In ancient Persia, refrigeration wasn't just about survival. It was about pleasure, about dignity. about having enough control over the environment to say, yes, I know it's 43 degrees Celsius, but would you care for a frozen custard garnished with edible flowers? And really, who could say no? You finish the last bite of your saffron ice cream as the sun climbs toward its lazy throne above the desert. The market's rhythm is in full swing now, soft voices bargaining over spices, donkeys clopping past with mild disdain, and someone playing a reed flute that may or may not be in tune. But as you drift toward the city's edge, the real party is just getting started, royal style. Because if there's one place where frozen treats were elevated to divine status, it was the Persian royal court. Here, ice wasn't just a luxury. It was a statement, a declaration, a chilled finger wag at the sun itself. You arrive at the gates of a summer palace, tall and serene, nestled within a grove of cypress and plane trees. A shallow stream runs down the center of the path, fed by a canet you can't see but definitely feel. Even the air here smells expensive. Pomegranate blossoms, musk, maybe a hint of grilled lamb, if your imagination is peckish. As you step through the gates, a servant in pristine linen hands you a damp cloth for your forehead. Another offers a silver tray with rosewater to sip. But the real prize awaits inside, behind the velvet-draped arches of the royal courtyard. Here, under silken canopies and towering windcatchers, a feast is underway. Low tables shimmer with copper trays piled high with almonds, dates, grilled fish, and, yes, bowls of frozen dessert glistening with condensation. There's bastani for the nobles, faluda for the poets, and even a curious ice-snow hybrid dusted with cinnamon, which a scribe is currently describing as divine slush. A servant bows and places a fresh bowl in your hands. This one is topped with crushed pistachio and a single dried rosebud. You lift the spoon, carved from bone, of course, and take a taste. It's colder than the breeze from the badger, and so smooth it feels like velvet that's been to finishing school. This is not dessert. This is power in a bowl. In the court of the Achaemenids, those ancient kings with names long enough to qualify as poetry, ice was a tool of status. Snow was hauled in from mountains, stored in deep yakhchāls built near the palaces, and guarded like treasure. Because it was treasure, you weren't just feeding your guests. You were showing them you had conquered nature, that you could bring winter into summer, frost into fire. Some sources say that during Nowruz, the Persian New Year, royalty served chilled drinks and frozen sweets as a symbol of renewal, of balance. You think it's also possible they just really liked showing off. Historians still argue whether Darius or Xerxes was the first to demand cold desserts at summer banquets. Some say it began as a medicinal practice, cooling the body, soothing the mind, calming the royal temper. Others believe it started with bored palace chefs trying to outdo each other with ever more elaborate refreshments. What if we serve the sorbet inside a melon carved like a lion's head? What if the spoon is a melon? Regardless of origin, the frozen delicacy quickly became ritual, not just for taste, but for display. Imagine this. You're a visiting diplomat from somewhere humid and uncultured. You walk into the Persian court expecting figs and lukewarm wine. Instead, someone hands you a gold-rimmed bowl of saffron ice cream. Your eyebrow lifts. Your guard lowers. Maybe your treaty terms get a little softer. Because how do you stay mad at a man who just gave you frozen roses in a desert? Even the architecture of the palace was designed to heighten the drama. Rooms were aligned so windcatchers funneled cool air directly toward the dining area. Underground storage pits beneath the banquet halls ensured the desserts stayed chilled until the very moment of service. And musicians, positioned carefully near the fountains, played songs meant to enhance the sensation of coolness. Because why not compose music that feels like snow? You move toward one of the smaller rooms, where a scholar is lecturing to a group of yawning nobles. He's talking about humoral theory, the ancient belief that food must balance the body's internal elements. Cold things calmed hot tempers. Sweet things soothed sorrow. And cold, sweet things? Those were practically therapy. One scroll, unrolled delicately on the floor, lists dozens of ideal summer combinations. Ice and rosewater for melancholy, snow and sour cherry for heatstroke, saffron custard with chilled almond milk for restless nights brought on by philosophical confusion. You nod. Been there. The king himself enters now, robed in silk dyed with indigo and stitched with tiny pearls. He waves away formality and settles into a cushion, accepting a bowl of dessert with a pleased grunt. One bite in, and he leans back, eyes closed, beard slightly frosted. A poet nearby murmurs something about snow on the mountain of wisdom. The king ignores him. A servant approaches with a platter of melting snow. It's shaped into the form of a lion mid-roar. You stare at it too long, and someone mistakes your wonder for approval. Next thing you know, it's being pushed into your hands with great ceremony. You glance down. The lion's nose is already sliding off. You take a polite bite. It's cold and sweet and, if you're honest, tastes mostly like pride and elbow grease. But that's the thing about ancient Persian luxury. It wasn't always practical. It wasn't always necessary. It was deliberate. Every chilled bite was a reminder that humans could thrive, not just survive, even in the most unforgiving landscapes. And as you recline on silk cushions, bowl in hand, with the windcatcher breathing softly above you, you begin to understand. This wasn't about dessert. It was about defiance. You step out from under the silken canopies of the royal court, your palate still tingling with saffron and snow. The sun now hangs high and arrogant in the sky, as if daring you to try and stay cool for one more hour. But you know something the sun doesn't. The cold in Persia didn't just sit in domes or trickle through fountains, it traveled. You follow a caravan trail leading eastward, the city shrinking behind you, replaced by low hills and the bleached flatness of desert land. In the distance, a plume of dust spirals slowly into the air, then another and another. You squint, and soon the silhouettes come into focus, camels. Dozens of them, striding in that infuriatingly smug way camels do, carrying bundles not of silk or salt, but snow. Yes, snow. In the desert. On a camel. This is the cold chain of ancient Persia, a logistical ballet of donkeys, drivers, and determined insulation. In winter, when the snow fell thick and fast on the Elburz Mountains, teams of workers packed it into huge bundles lined with straw, wrapped it tightly in goatskin or woven reed mats, and loaded it onto beasts of burden. Then they sent it south. Not just to cities with yakhchāls nearby, but to remote outposts, market towns, private estates, and even battle camps. Because a well-timed cup of ice water could win loyalty, lift morale, or just keep your commander from snapping a lute over someone's head. As you walk beside the caravan now, you hear the rhythmic groaning of the camels, the crunch of sand beneath hooves, and the soft rustle of straw rubbing against bundled snow. The pace is slow, deliberately so. Too much jostling, and the snow compresses and melts. Too fast, and the ice breaks apart before delivery. The drivers know this. Some of them have been doing it since they were old enough to climb a camel's knee. You approach a man who seems to be in charge. He's perched on a folded blanket, fanning himself lazily while keeping an eye on the bundles. He tells you that each pack contains between 10 to 30 kilos of snow. The route they're on? 3 days, each way. One rest stop is a halfway house with a miniature yakhchal, a pit dug into shaded earth, lined with lime and packed with straw, where the snow is recooled overnight. Historians still debate just how widespread these ice caravans were. Some claim they were limited to royal usage. Others point to archaeological remains in rural areas and argue that wealthy merchants and city governors also had access. There's even an old poem referencing ice that came on shaggy backs, served at a wedding far from any mountains. No one really knows how much snow was lost to the heat on these journeys, but they kept doing it. So clearly, it was worth it. You rest at a small caravanserai, one of those fortified roadside inns built for exactly this kind of journey. Inside the shaded courtyard, camel drivers sip tea and unwrap their loads. They open one bundle, revealing a compacted block of snow still glistening and very much cold. Children from the nearby village rush in, laughing and daring each other to touch it for more than a few seconds. One boy licks it. Immediate regret. Immediate applause. You sit near a low wall and watch as the drivers pour a small portion of the snow into a large ceramic basin. Then they stir in grape syrup and pomegranate molasses, slowly spinning the mixture with flat wooden paddles. A few drops of rose water. A slice of sour plum. A touch of salt. And just like that, a dessert is born. The camels grunt with indifference, chewing their cud, unimpressed by the magic they just helped deliver. Back on the trail, the group continues moving always toward places where ice is needed, wanted, worshipped. Some caravans travel at night, using the chill to preserve their loads. Others leave before dawn and race against the sun. There are even stories, maybe myth, maybe not, of runners carrying small pots of snow in wax-sealed jars across the desert for urgent deliveries. A noblewoman's fever. A general's temper. A poet's broken heart. You walk beside one such runner now, a lean figure with a pack slung across his back. He says nothing, just nods, and moves like he's part wind. The jar in his pack doesn't clink. It's sealed tight, wrapped in layers of linen soaked in salt water, kept cool by evaporation and hope. The road curves around a series of low hills, and in the distance, you glimpse a cluster of palm trees, your next stop. A wealthy landowner's villa, where a celebration is underway. Word has it they've hired 3 caravans to bring snow for tonight's feast. That's commitment. Or maybe just showing off. Either way, you're curious. As the villa nears, you pass a smaller group, an elderly couple sitting on woven mats, fanning themselves and sipping something pink from clay cups. They offer you one. You take a sip. It's chilled, tangy, sweet. You smile. It tastes like stubbornness. Because really, that's what all of this is. Stubbornness in the best possible way. People who refuse to accept that a desert couldn't be cool. Who built windcatchers into their roofs, cannons under their homes, and carved roads through sand just to bring a little frost into their lives. And as the caravan pushes on, disappearing into the shimmering heat haze ahead, you're left with a strange thought. In a land where the sun rules the day, it was the ice that made them kings. The sun leans into its zenith now, spilling heat like a careless god with no concept of moderation. You've arrived at the villa where the snow caravan was headed, and it's exactly the kind of place that doesn't pretend to be humble. Towering date palms line the garden, each one carefully spaced to maximize shade. A stone path curls toward an open courtyard where water trickles lazily from a lion-mouthed fountain. It's the kind of setting where people speak slowly, not because they're relaxed, but because it's simply too hot to do otherwise. But you're not here for decor. You're here for secrets. Specifically, the cool kind that hum underneath the desert like whispered spells. And just beyond the citrus grove, tucked behind a narrow door framed in glazed turquoise tiles, you descend into one of Persia's quietest marvels, the canal. The air changes instantly as you step down, like walking into the breath of a cave. The walls shift from sun-bleached clay to damp stone, and every step downward is a step away from the burn of the surface world. Soon you're in near darkness, your sandals tapping softly against the worn stone of a tunnel that stretches far beyond what your eyes can follow. This is no ordinary well. This is a subterranean river, hand-dug across miles and centuries. Canals carried mountain water to cities, farms, gardens, and palaces, not in open aqueducts, but in hidden arteries that pulsed quietly beneath the earth. Some are nearly 3,000 years old and still flowing. You follow the curve of the tunnel as it slants gently downhill. That's key, gradient control. Not too steep or the water rushes into roads. Not too flat or it stagnates. The slope is so subtle you barely notice it, but it's just enough to keep the water moving always toward life. Historians still debate how these gradients were measured. Some believe ancient engineers used plumb bobs, water levels, or even long strings with bells. Others suggest it was simply experience. Dig, observe, adjust, and sometimes dig again. By hand. You stop beside a shallow channel carved into the tunnel floor. Water slides along it with a gentle hush, so clear you can see the pebbles beneath. You kneel, dip your fingers in, and feel the bite of cold, unexpected, electric, delicious. This water isn't just for drinking. It's part of a whole system of cooling. In many Persian homes, especially larger estates like this one, the canal would flow directly beneath the house. Air would be drawn over the cold water channel and funneled through a shaft, a cooling tower, to create a primitive form of air conditioning. Combined with thick walls, sun-aligned layouts, and windcatchers above, the canal transformed desert architecture into something futuristic in its simplicity. Your entire house could breathe. And better yet, it could chill. You sit for a moment on a stone ledge worn smooth by centuries of gardeners, children, and servants. Somewhere above, in the sun-blasted courtyard, people are probably fanning themselves with embroidered linens. But down here, the air is heavy and cool. It smells of wet stone, iron, and just a hint of mint. Someone must have tossed a bundle into the water upstream. Why? Maybe it's a ritual. Maybe it keeps insects away. Maybe it just smells nice. Not everything in history has to be complicated. A quiet hum vibrates through the tunnel, a resonance created by the wind slipping down the vertical shafts above. You glance up at one, see the circle of sky far above you, framed by shadows. The air moves here, even underground. And it moves with intent. You wander further, until the tunnel splits. One path leads deeper toward the mountain source. The other curves toward the villa's central garden. You follow the latter and emerge into a basement chamber, square, dimly lit, and lined with ceramic jugs and clay amphorae resting in niches. A soft light filters through carved stone vents above, turning the space into a mosaic of shadows. This is a sardab, and unlike the grand party rooms upstairs, this place was built for storage and silence. Jars of milk, yogurt, dried herbs, and even pickled fish rest in the cool. The temperature here is easily 15 degrees lower than outside. You could nap in here, and many people did. In fact, entire families moved into their sardabs during the hottest weeks of summer, sleeping in shifts like subterranean cats. One wall is fitted with small slits, cooling vents, and you notice a clay bowl resting beside them. Inside? Thick yogurt, bright white, still cool to the touch. It's been flavored with cucumber, mint, and garlic, mastokayer, a dish still beloved in Iran today. Served chilled, it tastes like the desert itself forgot to be hot for a moment. You take a small sip. It's tangy, refreshing, and subtly sharp. The garlic hits your tongue like a sleepy joke. Not aggressive, just present. Like someone reminding you it's not all about ice cream. There's something meditative about this space. You can feel the centuries pressing gently against your shoulders, not as a burden, but as an embrace. Generations of people relying on this water, this silence, this coolness. Not just to survive the heat, but to reclaim a sense of calm in a land built to burn. Back at the surface, the garden is alive with conversation and clinking dishes. But down here, the cannet keeps whispering. Water, wind, shadow, and stone, all conspiring quietly to outwit the sun. And for 1,000 years? They've succeeded. You linger a few more moments in the cool hush of the sardab, reluctant to rejoin the brightness above. But curiosity, your oldest, most loyal traveling companion, nudges you upward again. The villa fades behind you as you take a narrow path that winds through low hills dappled with hardy shrubs and the occasional almond tree, their leaves fluttering in the now lazy wind. You're heading toward a place older than the palace, older than the markets, older, in some ways, than refrigeration itself. You arrive at a Zoroastrian fire temple, its clay brick dome half sunken into the earth, its thick stone walls bleached pale by centuries of sun. There's a silence here that feels deliberate, not empty, but watchful. You step inside, the air immediately cooling around your ankles like it's been waiting just for you. The fire burns at the center, as it has for generations, tended by quiet priests who drift past in white robes. But what you're really here to see isn't the fire. It's what the fire doesn't touch. Just behind the main chamber, in a quiet, windowless annex, is one of Persia's most overlooked architectural hybrids, the storage cellars of fire temples. A place where heat and cold were carefully balanced, side by side, and not allowed to argue. The Zoroastrians were masters of elemental harmony. Fire, water, air, and earth weren't just metaphors, they were daily concerns. And so it made perfect sense that even in places built to honor sacred flame, they created rooms designed to preserve cold. You duck through a low archway into one of these rooms. The ceiling is vaulted, the walls lined with dark stone, and the floor is packed clay. In one corner sits a deep, circular pit. At the bottom, a clay pot, wrapped in straw, filled with goat's milk curd, thick, chilled, and preserved for weeks. Here, the cold doesn't come from a yakhchal or a windcatcher. It comes from depth, stone, and ritual. You sit on the edge of the pit, brushing a thin film of condensation from the stone. Even now, even at the hottest point of the day, this room stays cool. Historians still debate whether these temple cold rooms were designed with refrigeration in mind, or simply used as convenient storage. Some argue the duality of fire and ice was intentional, a symbolic gesture of balance in architecture and spirit. Others insist it was practicality dressed in piety. After all, even priests need cold yogurt. You hear footsteps and glance up. A young priest enters with a ceramic bowl. He smiles and offers it to you. As you do, a cold yogurt soup, brimming with mint and tiny rice grains. It's sour, clean, and shockingly satisfying. You sip quietly, the thick coolness cutting through the heat that clings to you like a second rope. Around the room, you notice other vessels, smoked salt, pickled shallots, jujube fruit dried and stored in clay. Everything arranged with care, nothing wasted. This wasn't just about refrigeration. It was about preservation of food, of balance, of memory. The priest sits beside you and speaks softly, explaining that certain items were only cooled here, ritually cooled, you might say, because they were to be used in sacred meals or shared with the poor. The contrast was intentional, fire to purify, cold to preserve. One for transformation, the other for continuity. You finish your bowl and thank him. He nods and leads you out into a shaded colonnade, where a stone channel carries cool water past the temple wall. Not flashy, just functional. quiet, a pulse. The path ahead leads to a modest garden, dry, but alive. Pomegranate trees, a single fig, wild herbs peeking through dusty soil, and a stone bench, half in sun, half in shadow. You sit, letting your body warm again, but not entirely. That coolness from the cellar clings to you, wrapped around your spine like a forgotten breeze. It's strange, you think, how even fire-worshipping cultures couldn't help but chase the cold. How the flame and the frost, always seen as opposites, coexisted under one roof. And perhaps that's the real genius of ancient Persia, not picking a side, but holding both. You close your eyes. The wind brushes past your cheek like a reminder. Everything burns eventually, but everything melts too. You rise from the stone bench slowly, brushing bits of dust from your robe and letting your limbs reacquaint themselves with movement. The garden path beyond the fire temple curves away like a sigh, and before long, you're walking again, this time toward the edge of the city, where architecture gives way to open land and the tools of the everyday. Because while palaces and temples are impressive, the real innovations of ancient Persia often lived in simpler places, courtyards, kitchens, and clay pots that didn't just keep things cool, they made life bearable. You arrive at a humble compound tucked beside a canal, its walls crumbling slightly at the edges, like a cake left in the oven just a bit too long. No domes here. No marble. Just ingenuity baked into mud brick. In the central courtyard, shaded by grapevines and canvas, a woman is tending to several clay jars arranged in the shade like a sleepy orchestra. She doesn't look up. She's focused, steady, and wearing the expression of someone who's been defeating the heat for longer than your ancestors have been arguing about the best type of pillow. She's using a system that's both elegant and ancient, evaporative cooling. Each jar, or zayer, is made from porous clay. The walls sweat when water is poured over them, and that slow evaporation pulls heat from the jar's surface, cooling the contents inside. You approach one and touch it gently. It's cold. Not left in the fridge overnight, cold, but cold enough to surprise your fingertips. Inside, you're told, is barley water, steeped with dried lime and a hint of cinnamon. You take a sip. It's earthy, slightly sour, and refreshing enough to make you forgive the desert for being the desert. These jars were a staple across Persia, not just in noble homes, but in bakeries, bathhouses, and roadside stalls. Some were buried halfway in the ground for insulation, others kept in covered alcoves near windcatchers or shaded cannon vents. The system required no maintenance, no fire, no moving parts. Just water, clay, and air. You sit beneath the grapevine for a while, watching the woman move between jars, tending each one like a musician tuning instruments. She picks up another, a wide-mouthed vessel filled with thick date syrup, and checks its temperature with the back of her hand. Satisfied, she covers it again and moves on. In a corner of the courtyard, you notice a peculiar contraption, two clay pots stacked inside each other, with the space between filled with sand. A piece of wet cloth is draped over the top. This is a pot-in-pot refrigerator, or zayer, still used in rural areas of Iran today. It can keep vegetables fresh for days. Milk? Up to a week. Historians still debate whether this device was a new invention in medieval Persia or an evolution of earlier techniques borrowed from Mesopotamia. Either way, the genius lies in its simplicity. 2 pots, some wet sand, and a refusal to let cucumbers go mushy before their time. You reach into the inner pot, guided by the woman's gentle nod, and pull out a cool cucumber, sliced and resting in a ceramic bowl with crushed mint and salt. You bite into it, and it snaps, not just crisp, but cold. It's the kind of sensation that makes your brain pause and reevaluate the day's temperature. Overhead, the wind shifts slightly, rustling the vines and sending a shiver of shade across the floor. In that moment, you understand. These weren't just storage tools. They were comfort rituals. The way the modern world clings to AC and iced coffee, these people clung to their pots, their shadows, their silent systems of self-preservation. You thank the woman and move toward a shaded corridor where cooling alcoves, small, arched recesses in the wall, house jars of yogurt, bundles of herbs, and something wrapped tightly in linen. It turns out to be fermented goat cheese, aged in a jar, kept just cool enough to survive weeks of desert heat. You take a bite. It's strong, bold, possibly the kind of flavor that once started a family feud. But it's also fresh. The temperature has preserved its sharpness, its texture. In this kitchen, temperature is flavor. Back in the courtyard, the woman pours water over the pots again, and you watch as the moisture slowly sinks into the clay. Minutes later, the surfaces are cool again. It's like the jars are breathing, each one exhaling the heat and quietly demanding another drink. It strikes you that this method, as humble as it is, might outlast even modern refrigeration. No electricity, no wires, no breakdowns. Just the earth, doing what it does best when left to its own rhythms. And maybe that's the bigger truth here. Cooling, in ancient Persia, wasn't about conquering heat. It was about coexisting with it, working alongside the elements, not against them. Harnessing wind, water, shadow, and soil not to dominate the climate, but to live within it wisely. You lean back against a mud brick wall, the heat of the day pressing gently against your skin, not hostile, just present. But around you, in the jars, the corners, the shade, the cold is waiting. Still, patient, clever, just like the people who built this place. You leave the courtyard behind with its quiet orchestra of clay jars and cooling shadows, the taste of cucumber and mint still lingering on your tongue. The air is hotter now, but you barely notice. After walking through so many cool spaces, it's as if a bit of that stillness is now part of you, like your internal temperature has quietly negotiated a better deal. Your path now takes you beyond the heart of Persia, tracing the old trade routes that once fanned outward like capillaries from the empire's beating core. You're chasing the footprints of ideas, specifically, the export of Persian cold tech to other cultures. Because for all their cleverness at home, the Persians didn't keep their cooling secrets to themselves. Over time, their icy ingenuity traveled far and wide, quietly influencing how other ancient civilizations learned to keep things cold, or at least, less sweaty. You start by following a well-worn route west toward the ancient Greek world. The link between the two empires was never just war and politics, it was also envy. And few things were more envy-inducing than the image of a Persian noble sipping chilled rosewater in the middle of July. There are stories, some likely exaggerated, of Greek ambassadors returning from Persia and demanding their builders construct ice pits like the ones they saw in Susa. Some scholars argue that early Greek subterranean granaries and snow pits were influenced directly by Persian yakhchāls. Others point to similarities in wind tower architecture in later Egyptian settlements, especially during periods of Persian rule over the region. You imagine one of those architects, let's call him Demetrios, standing in the blazing sun of Alexandria, scribbling furiously into a wax tablet while mumbling, "Why didn't we think of that dome with a whole idea?" From Greece, you drift east toward India, where the concept of ice was already embedded in Vedic texts as something magical, medicinal, and deeply desirable. During the Mughal era, long after the initial Persian influence, you find royal courts in Delhi constructing their own ice houses and using snow from the Himalayas packed in salt and straw, not unlike the Persian caravans you once followed. Even Babur, founder of the Mughal Empire, famously imported Persian artisans to build gardens, fountains, and cooling structures designed to mimic those of his ancestral lands. Gardens were not just symbols of paradise, they were refrigerated dreams, threaded with water channels that cooled the air as much as they soothed the soul. And what about Rome? The famously bath-obsessed empire had their own snow runners, yes, but the influence of Persian systems might have nudged them towards certain underground storage methods. Roman hypocausts get all the attention for heating, but lesser-known cellars and cool rooms hint at shared knowledge. After all, trade brings more than silk and saffron. It brings blueprints. Historians still argue over how much of this was direct copying and how much was convergence, brilliant minds in different places solving the same problem. But one thing is clear, Persia was a node in a great, uncooled web of human creativity. A place where technology didn't just stay local. It wandered. You step into a small, dusty museum on the outskirts of town. Its entrance is shaded by an awning stitched with date palm fibers. Inside, the coolness is faint but real. No AC. Just thick walls and patient architecture. An elderly curator waves you in and begins explaining softly, like he's afraid the artifacts will wake up, that this collection houses evidence of Persia's cold influence. Clay fragments of early refrigeration pots. Charcoal samples used in Yakhchal flooring. Even a faded scroll depicting a caravan route annotated with cooling stations, spots where cold water or snow might be replenished. In one corner, under glass, sits a miniature model of a yakhchal complete with straw layers, an inner well, and an angled wall to block the sun. It's tiny, but it radiates a strange dignity, like it knows what it represents. Nearby, a map stretches across the wall. It's hand-drawn, with exaggerated mountains and dramatically oversized rivers. But there's something familiar in its pattern, a series of dots and lines tracing from Persia outward, to India, Egypt, Greece, and eventually, across the Silk Road. Each dot is a place where someone once said, "It's too hot. Let's borrow that trick the Persians use." You leave the museum as the curator waves gently behind you. Outside, the sun has started its slow decline, the light now honeyed and forgiving. You walk past a group of children playing near a fountain, splashing water with such pure enthusiasm you almost join them. Instead, you sit under a fig tree, the air breezing softly through the leaves. And you think about how ideas move, silently, steadily, across sand and sea. How something as ordinary as a desire for cool yogurt or snow in summer can lead to structures, systems, civilizations shaped by the chase for chill. And how somewhere out there, another culture may be taking a second look at a clay pot sweating in the shade and thinking, "We should try that." The wind carries a quiet rustle now, gentler than before, like the desert itself is beginning to yawn. You stand from beneath the fig tree and follow the fading light, past shuttered stalls and lazy dogs stretched long across sun-warmed stones. It's the hour when people retreat indoors, when tea replaces ambition, and the world begins its slow exhale. But you're following a different trail now, not where ice was stored, but where the empire melted. Because while Persian cold tech endured, the dynasties that built it did not. From the Achaemenids to the Parthians, from the Sassanids to the Abbasids, one empire gave way to the next, each carrying forward pieces of the old knowledge, sometimes reverently, sometimes just by accident. You pass an abandoned yakhchāl outside a small village, its once perfect cone now slumping at the edges like a sleeping hat. But even in decay, it holds something noble. A man nearby sits weaving baskets and tells you the dome hasn't been used in 20 years, not since the newer concrete storage shed was built closer to town. But his grandmother used to sneak in during hot summers and nap against the inner wall. It was better than any fan, he says, eyes twinkling, and cheaper than being rich. You nod and move on, winding through villages where old canals have dried and filled with dust, where windcatchers no longer hum because their vents have been blocked by satellite dishes and rusted rebar. Still, their bones remain. The architecture remembers, even when the people don't. And yet, there are still survivors. You come upon the city of Kerman, where several yakhchāls are not just intact, they're in use. Children run around one of them, tossing pebbles into the well at its center. Inside, there are ice bricks wrapped in canvas, kept chilled for local sherbet vendors who sell rose-laced drinks by bicycle cart. The system, despite its age, is still working. Still cool. In the bazaar, you stop by a shop selling copper vessels, and the merchant casually mentions that the water in his jug stays colder if left beside the clay walls of the cannet shaft that still trickles nearby. "It's just the way it's always been," he shrugs, as if explaining why the sky is blue. Some historians argue this is the ultimate proof of Persian brilliance. Not just that they invented these systems, but that they were adopted, adapted, and persisted even as empires fell. When Alexander swept through Persia, raising cities and rewriting maps, the yakhchāls remained. So did the canets. So did the quiet domestic rituals, the damp cloths, the shaded courtyards, the yogurt pots tucked carefully into cool alcoves. The Abbasid Caliphate, with its golden age of science, took these systems and improved upon them, refining windcatcher angles, mapping underground water routes with early surveying tools, writing treatises on the precise dimensions needed for thermal inertia. Scholars from Baghdad studied the Persian designs and exported them further, east into Central Asia and west toward Andalusia. And when the Mongols came, loud, fierce, and terrible, many of the great cities crumbled. But what do you think the Mongol Khans built in their summer retreats on the steppes? Small yakhchāls, cannon-inspired channels, clay pots stacked in pairs and wrapped in wool. Because no matter how brutal the conquest, no matter how loud the banners or heavy the swords, everyone still wanted cold water in July. You find yourself in a small library now, barely more than a room with arched ceilings and the scent of dried papyrus. A young archivist shows you a crumbling scroll, its ink faded but legible, diagrams of ice pits, water slopes, and wind tower configurations. He tells you it was copied by hand during the Safavid period based on older designs. He doesn't know who made the original. Does it matter? He smiles. It still works. You flip through sketches of domes and clay jars, of cross-sections labeled in Arabic, then Persian, then Turkic, cultures stacked like blankets, each one warming the next, even as they reached for the cold. Eventually, the Ottomans came, and then the British, and then the oil rigs and air conditioners. But air conditioning didn't erase the old ways. It just competed with them. In villages where the grid fails in summer, where power flickers or prices soar, people still return to shade, breeze, and clay. And it's not just rural. Some modern Iranian architects, young, slick-haired, and fluent in AutoCAD, have begun incorporating windcatchers into glass-walled houses. Not as nostalgia, not as a joke, as strategy. You step outside the library, and the light is turning orange now, filtered through dust and fading heat. In the distance, a yakhchāl stands silhouetted against the horizon, proud and still. A goat bleats somewhere. Someone haggles over a bag of mint. You think of how long it's been since that first shallow pool froze under the stars. Since someone stacked snow in straw and called it foresight. Since a family lowered yogurt into a clay pot and called it good enough to keep. And through all the rises and falls, all the swords and scrolls, one truth has persisted. Empires melt. But coolness? Coolness endures. The light has shifted again, softening into that golden hush that slips through alleys and kisses rooftops just before night returns. You walk slowly now, tracing your steps back toward the heart of the city, where the shadows grow longer and the domes glow like cooled embers. The heat has eased its grip. The air, at last, feels forgiving. Your destination isn't grand. It isn't ancient or legendary. It's home. Not yours exactly, but close enough. A small, square house nestled between two others, its courtyard shaded by grapevines, its walls thick with stories. You push open the gate and step inside. There's a low hum in the air, the same gentle breath you've heard through canals, across windcatchers, and around Yakhchal walls. A breeze, shaped by centuries of wisdom, drifts through the courtyard like a polite guest. And there, waiting for you, is a bedroll spread beneath a windcatcher. Simple, inviting, cool to the touch. You settle in, the woven blanket soft beneath your fingers, the pillow filled with cotton and maybe just a little sand. A clay cup rests nearby on a low table, filled with chilled dew, that minty, salty yogurt drink you've come to love. You sip slowly. The cold slides down your throat like memory. The windcatcher above you moans softly, an old voice, patient and rhythmic. It funnels night air down into the room, across the wet cloth draped above the doorway, and into your lungs. No hum of electricity, no digital clicks, just air, working the way it always has. Around the courtyard, the house exhales. Heat seeps upward, away from the shaded floor. The walls radiate the cool they've been hoarding all day, and the stone beneath you sighs in relief. Even the stars begin to peek out, as if they've been waiting for the temperature to drop. From a window, someone hums a lullaby. A mother? A grandmother? It doesn't matter. The sound blends with the wind, with the water still trickling in the garden fountain, with the soft thump of sandals in the alley beyond. You close your eyes. The coolness is more than temperature now. It's a feeling. A promise kept by clever hands. A reward for patience. The result of systems and rituals and instincts passed from mason to mason, mother to daughter, generation to generation. And here's the best part. You didn't need to conquer anything to earn this. No wires, no voltage, no buttons or blinking lights. Just shade, clay, and wind. Three things that have existed long before you and will be here long after. You take another sip of dew. It's starting to lose its chill, but that's okay. You're not, because now you're cool. In the deepest, most ancient sense of the word. Word count, 1098. Wind down begins, final 300 words. The breeze softens further now, becoming less a movement and more a memory. Your limbs grow heavier, your breaths longer. The stars overhead stretch out across the velvet sky, as if someone spilled a jar of sugar into the night. Above you, the windcatcher whispers, a lullaby written by architecture and air. It doesn't demand anything of you. It just reminds you, you're safe. You're held. You're cool. The walls of the house no longer feel like barriers. They feel like arms. Embracing you, shielding you, anchoring you to a time when people built not just for survival, but for comfort, for stillness, for sleep. And in this moment, the history you've walked through, the yakhchāls, the canals, the shaded courtyards and saffron sorbets, they all melt together into a single feeling, peace. So let yourself drift now. Let the weight of the day slide off your shoulders like a robe slipping to the floor. Let your breath move slow and quiet, like water in a stone channel. Let your thoughts cool, one by one, until even memory begins to rest. You are in the arms of old wisdom now, and it's okay to sleep.